The massive industrial door did not merely open, it groaned as if protesting years of neglect. Metal scraped against metal in a slow, grinding slide, sending heavy echoes through the cavernous studio. The sound multiplied as it bounced off concrete walls and unfinished stone, lingering long after the door settled open. Dust stirred in the air, floating like pale ghosts in the slanted morning light. A cold wind slipped in through a broken window high above and wandered through the studio. It carried the faint scent of rain and old stone, whispering over surfaces worn smooth by time. Pigeons cooed softly in the rafters, unseen but unmistakable, their wings occasionally fluttering and dislodging more dust. Footsteps entered cautiously, each step striking the concrete with a sharp echo that sounded too loud for the space. The rhythm was hesitant, aware of how small it was against the vast room. Each footfall announced itself and returned distorted from the walls. "Hello, Mr. Castillo? The agency sent me. For the cleaning job?" Her voice barely settled before the studio swallowed it. It drifted upward, brushed stone and steel, and dissolved into silence. The pause stretched uncomfortably long, as if testing her nerve. The silence broke with rhythm rather than words. A chisel struck stone deeper in the studio, repeating at a steady pace like a heartbeat. Each precise strike sent faint vibrations through the floor and into June's bones. "Mr. Castillo," she moved toward the sound, guided by the metallic pulse. Half-formed statues emerged from shadow, marble blocks scarred with tool marks, and surfaces layered with fine white powder.
"You are early. I hate early. It disrupts the light."
He did not look at her, keeping his focus on the stone. The chisel rose and fell with mechanical devotion, guided by years of discipline. "I'm sorry, I can wait outside." The suggestion hung in the air as dust shifted under her shoes. She felt acutely out of place among the statues and the severe man.
"No, you're here. Grab a broom. The south corner is full of marble dust. Do not touch the statues, do not touch the tools, and do not speak to me while I work."
The chiseling stopped and a heavy sigh followed. When he turned, it was slow and deliberate, his instructions delivered like immutable laws. "Okay, I'm June, by the way." Her attempt at friendliness felt small, a reflexive reach for normalcy. The name slipped out as a reminder that she was a person.
"I didn't ask for your name. I asked for a cleaner. Clean."
The word landed with finality. He turned back to his work, dismissing her presence. The broom whispered across the concrete as she swept. Dust gathered and rose in pale clouds, coating her shoes and clothes. Without realizing it, June began to hum a faint, familiar tune. It steadied her nerves and filled the quiet with a fragile rhythm.
"Stop."
The shout cracked through the studio, sending pigeons fluttering and making June jerk in surprise. "I didn't touch anything." The broom clattered to the floor and skidded across the concrete. Her heart slammed as she froze.
"Stop humming. It's off-key. And stop moving like that."
Heavy boots approached, each step deliberate. The air around him felt denser with dust and intensity. Moving like what? He circled her slowly, inspecting her like another object. White dust coated his clothes and hair, giving him a spectral look.
"You sweep with your shoulders hunched. You are hiding your neck. Why do you hide your neck?"
The question was curious rather than accusatory, delivered with analytical interest. "I do not know. It is a habit." Her voice faltered, the answer drawn from unconscious self-protection.
"It ruins the line."
His dust-coated fingers brushed beneath her chin and lifted her face, guiding her posture with practiced precision.
"There, that is the line. The sternocleidomastoid muscle connecting to the clavicle. It is the most beautiful line in the human body, and you are hiding it. What a waste."
Time slowed as her chin tilted upward. Her pulse thundered, every sensation amplified by his closeness and reverence. "Mr. Castillo, you are getting dust on my face." The words came out breathless. Her awareness narrowed to where his fingers had been.
"Dust washes off. Bad posture is forever. Go back to cleaning and keep your chin up."
He stepped away and returned to his stone as the chisel resumed its rhythm. June stood a moment longer, then retrieved the broom and continued cleaning, newly aware of every line her body made. Several days had slipped by since June first entered the studio, each one folding into the next with quiet monotony. The space was filled with the constant presence of water, from the steady rush of a faucet to the scrape of a brush against the stone floor. Pale light filtered down from the high skylight, illuminating dust motes and unfinished sculptures alike. June knelt on the cold ground with her sleeves rolled up, hands raw from work, focused only on the rhythm of cleaning and unaware of how precariously the room balanced between order and chaos. When she finally straightened, her muscles protesting, it happened in a blink. Her shoulder clipped the pedestal behind her, and the clay bust perched on top shuddered before tipping and falling. It struck the wet floor with a heavy sound, collapsing into itself as water splashed outward and erased its features in an instant. No, the word tore out of her as she lunged forward, but it was already too late. The bust was reduced to a shapeless ruin, bleeding water, and clay into the grooves of the floor. Panic flooded her chest as footsteps thundered from the adjoining room, sharp and fast against the echoing walls.
What did you do?
June turned toward him, with her vision blurring. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she gestured helplessly at the mess on the floor, her hands trembling and slick with water and clay. "I'm so sorry. I bumped it. I ruined it. It's smashed." Roman stopped at the edge of the puddle and studied the collapsed sculpture with unsettling intensity. To June, it looked like pure destruction, but to him, it seemed to register as something else entirely.
It was garbage anyway. I was going to destroy it.
The words hung in the air, heavy and disorienting. June struggled to reconcile her guilt with his indifference as a fragile sense of relief crept in. "Really? You're not mad?" Roman's gaze shifted from the ruined clay to her face, and then to her feet, standing in the murky water. Irritation flickered across his features, not at the mess, but at her tears and distress.
I am mad that you are crying. It is annoying.
He raised a hand to stop her and studied her intently. Light from the skylight caught the moisture on her skin and carved her profile out of shadow as he stepped closer.
Wait, don't move.
"What?" Roman barely heard her as he tracked how the light shifted across her face, how sorrow softened her features instead of hardening them.
The light from the skylight, it is hitting your profile.
He closed the distance between them, eyes sharp with intensity, as if he had stumbled upon something rare after years of searching.
You have a structure I haven't seen in years. Soft yet tragic.
The word echoed inside her chest, heavier than she expected, lingering in a way she could not dismiss. "Tragic?" Roman answered without hesitation as he reached for a stool, his thoughts already racing ahead.
Yes, I need to capture it.
He dragged the stool beneath the skylight with deliberate care, and the studio shifted from routine labor to charged anticipation.
Sit here.
"Now, I'm working." Roman straightened as authority settled over him, sharpened now by purpose as he looked at her as something essential.
This is work. I am firing you as a cleaner. I am hiring you as a model. Double the pay. Sit.
The studio was wrapped in a fragile hush, the kind that felt deliberate rather than empty. Light filtered through high, dust-fogged windows and settled softly on unfinished canvases and blocks of stone. The air smelled of charcoal and old clay, dry and mineral, clinging to the back of the throat. Every sound was magnified, the faint rasp of charcoal scratching against paper, the subtle shift of weight on the wooden floor, the quiet tension of a space where concentration ruled absolutely. June stood at the center of the room, locked into position, her body held at an unnatural angle designed for observation rather than comfort. Her breathing betrayed her long before her words did, short, uneven draws of air that trembled slightly in her chest. Each breath felt like a risk, threatening movement, threatening failure. Muscles along her spine burned with the dull ache of prolonged stillness, and the awareness of being watched sharpened every sensation until even the smallest itch felt unbearable.
Still, you are twitching.
My nose itches, and my back hurts. Holding this pose is hard. Roman did not look up immediately. His focus remained fixed on the page, eyes narrowed, as if the solution to her discomfort and his frustration might both be solved through sheer will. His posture was rigid and disciplined, shaped by decades of work that had taught him to ignore his own body entirely. To him, discomfort was not an obstacle, but a raw material, something to be shaped and endured.
Art is suffering. Deal with it.
The charcoal slowed, then stopped altogether. Roman exhaled through his nose, dissatisfaction radiating from him in silence before he finally pulled the stick away from the paper. He tilted the sketch, studying it from a new angle, his mouth tightening. The drawing lay incomplete in his eyes, as if it refused to reveal the truth he was chasing. Frustration crept in, not loud, but heavy.
It is not right. The charcoal is too flat. I need to feel the depth.
He rose from his stool with measured intent, the movement slow but decisive. The distance between artist and subject closed, charged with a sudden awareness that had not existed while he remained seated. His shadow stretched toward her, cutting across the floor, and with it came a shift in the room's energy. Less observational now, more intimate, and more dangerous.
I need to measure you.
Measure me? Like for clothes? June's attempt at levity wavered in the air. Her heart had begun to beat faster, not from exertion, but from uncertainty. She had expected to be seen and studied, but not approached like this, not reduced so precisely. The idea of being measured, not as a person, but as a form, sent a strange shiver through her, equal parts curiosity and vulnerability.
No, like for sculpture. I need to know the distance between your cheekbone and your jaw. The depth of your eye socket. May I touch you?
The question lingered longer than it should have. June swallowed hard, the motion tight and audible in the silence. Her mind raced through reasons to refuse, to step back, to reclaim the space between them. But beneath the hesitation was something else. A pull, an unspoken trust, or perhaps a reckless need to be understood beyond words. Yes, Roman's hands came up slowly and deliberately, as if giving her every chance to change her mind. When his fingers finally made contact, the sensation was immediate and unmistakable. His skin was rough from years of labor, warm with life and dry with charcoal dust. The contact was gentle, but assured, sending a quiet shock through her system that settled deep beneath her skin.
Your bone structure is exquisite.
His thumbs traced along her brows with reverence, mapping the subtle rise and fall as though committing them to memory. His touch was not hurried. Each movement carried intention, a sculptor's patience, lingering where the light would strike and where shadow would pool. June stood frozen, aware of every point of contact, every breath, every second stretching longer than the last.
Here, the ridge, it catches the light.
His hands drifted lower, following the line of her face to the vulnerable column of her neck. There, beneath his fingers, her pulse betrayed her completely. It fluttered fast and unsteady, a rhythm she could not control. The intimacy of the gesture made the room feel smaller, as though the walls themselves were listening.
And here, the pulse, it is beating fast.
You make me nervous. The admission slipped out before she could stop it, honest and unguarded. Her voice was softer now, stripped of humor or deflection. She was acutely aware of how she must look, still and exposed, held together by nothing but trust and the thin line of professionalism between them.
Why? I am just an old man playing with mud.
You are not just an old man. You are Roman Castillo. And you are looking at me like you want to take me apart. The accusation hung heavy, charged with meaning neither of them fully named. Roman's gaze sharpened, not with anger, but with something darker and more sincere. For a moment, the years fell away from him, replaced by the raw intensity of a creator confronting something that mattered too much.
I do not want to take you apart, June. I want to put you together, in stone, so you never age, so you never die.
The words were quiet and almost reverent, and for a brief moment, they felt less like ambition and more like a confession. Then Roman stepped back, pulling his hands away as if the closeness itself had burned him. The space between them returned, abrupt and necessary.
Break time, drink some water, you are flushed.
The room was not quiet even before the work began. Moist air clung to the studio, heavy with the mineral smell of wet earth and iron-rich clay. A long wooden table bore the scars of years of labor, cuts, stains, and dents, each mark a record of pressure and repetition. When the clay hit the surface, it landed with visceral finality, dense blocks thrown down with enough force to shudder through the table legs and into the floor, announcing the beginning of something physical, demanding, and irreversible. The sound of the clay was not a single noise, but a sequence of wet slaps, dull thuds, and the soft, tearing sound of moisture giving way under impact. Each block deformed slightly as it landed, edges sagging, and surfaces glistening under the studio lights. The material looked alive in its own way, responsive and vulnerable, already waiting for hands to tell it what it would become.
Today we sculpt. I am going to make a bust of you. Life-size, but first we need to prepare the clay. It has air bubbles. We need to wedge it. Come here.
June hesitated only briefly before moving closer, the space around the table narrowing as she stepped into Roman's orbit. The clay loomed between them, unshaped and heavy, its sheer mass intimidating. The task ahead was not delicate or ornamental, but labor that asked for the whole body, not just the hands. The studio lights reflected faintly off the damp surface, highlighting every uneven ridge and hollow. I do not know how.
I will show you. Stand at the table.
He positioned himself close enough that there was no ambiguity in the contact. His presence settled behind her, solid and warm, his chest aligning with her back as if this were the most natural configuration in the world. The table pressed against her thighs, the clay directly in front of her, and suddenly there was nowhere else to focus but forward, nowhere else to move but into the work.
Put your hands on the clay. Push down. With your body weight, like this.
Her fingers sank into the cool, resistant surface, and the clay answered immediately, deforming under the pressure. When she leaned forward, the resistance increased, pushing back as if testing her resolve. Behind her, Roman adjusted his stance, aligning his weight with hers, guiding not just her hands, but her posture, her balance, and the subtle mechanics of how force traveled through a body and into the material. The sounds that followed were intimate in their rawness, the squish of compressed clay, the slap as it folded over itself, and the unsteady rhythm of breathing growing heavier with effort. Each movement was slower than expected, drawn out by the density of the clay and the need to control it rather than rush it. Time seemed to stretch, measured only by pressure and release.
Harder. You have to dominate the clay, June. If you are weak, it will crack in the kiln. Push.
The instruction translated immediately into sensation. Her muscles strained, arms and shoulders burning as she tried to give more than she thought she had. The clay resisted, stubborn and uncompromising, demanding commitment. There was no partial effort here. Either she imposed herself fully, or the material would remember every hesitation later, immortalized as a flaw. It is so heavy. Roman's hands came down over hers, larger and steadier, enclosing her grip. The added weight changed everything. Where she had been fighting the clay alone, now the force doubled and flowed, becoming coordinated. His presence was no longer just behind her, but in her arms, her hands, and the shared line of pressure driving downward.
Use my strength. Lean back into me. Yes. Feel the clay yielding? It submits to pressure.
The clay finally gave way, folding obediently as trapped air was forced out with a faint hiss, The transformation was immediate and satisfying, the mass becoming smoother and more cohesive under their combined control. The rhythm settled in, press, fold, turn, each repetition reinforcing the last and building momentum and confidence with every cycle. It feels good. The admission slipped out between breaths, unguarded. Sweat dampened her palms, mixing with the slick residue of clay and blurring the line between effort and sensation. There was a clarity in the exertion, a narrowing of focus until nothing existed but weight, warmth, and the responsive give of the material beneath her hands.
It feels like control.
He leaned in closer as he spoke, his voice lowered and intimate, his breath brushing her ear. The words were not instructional this time, but declarative, naming the feeling she had not yet articulated. Around them, the studio seemed to recede, reduced to this single point of contact and intention.
Your hands are getting dirty.
I do not mind. Clay streaked her skin in pale lines, packed under her nails, evidence of participation rather than mess. The dirtiness felt earned and even necessary, a visible sign that she was no longer standing apart from the process. The material marked her as much as she marked it.
Good, because art is a dirty business.
His hands remained over hers, steady and insistent, guiding without releasing. The clay moved more easily now, fully responsive and shaped by the established rhythm. There was no urgency, only continuity, a shared understanding that stopping would break something fragile and newly formed between motion and intent.
We are in rhythm now. Do not stop.
The storm did not merely rage outside the studio, it claimed the night as its own. Thunder rolled in vast, echoing waves, as if the sky itself were cracking open, and rain lashed violently against the skylights above. Each drop struck glass with relentless insistence, 1,000 tiny fists, drumming out a rhythm that felt both chaotic and deliberate. Inside, the storm's voice swallowed all others, pressing in through the walls, through the bones, until the world beyond the studio seemed erased. Darkness filled the space where the light once lived. The power outage left the studio stripped to its rawest form, shadows swallowing unfinished statues and tools alike. Shapes loomed and dissolved, depending on where the mind dared to look. The air grew heavy, with the smell of wet stone, clay, and dust, all stirred together by the sudden drop in temperature. In that darkness, time slowed, and every breath sounded louder than it should have. The power is out. We should stop.
Not for...
Roman's voice cut through the darkness with quiet certainty, steady and unshaken by the storm. He did not reach for a switch or a candle. Instead, he seemed to settle deeper into the absence of light, as if the darkness itself were a familiar companion. His presence felt closer now, no longer defined by sight, but by sound, breath, and the subtle shift of air.
I work better in the dark. My hands see better than my eyes. Come to the pedestal.
The pedestal stood somewhere between them, unseen yet undeniable, like an altar waiting for its offering. June hesitated, her feet uncertain against the cold floor, each step cautious. Without light, distance became distorted. Every movement felt intimate, as though the room itself were drawing her inward, toward him. I can't see you.
I am right here.
His voice was suddenly close, too close to be accidental. It brushed against her ear, warm and low, raising a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. In the dark, his nearness became tangible, a presence she could almost feel pressing gently against her skin.
I am going to mold your shoulder. I need to touch you to transfer the shape to the clay. Is that permitted?
The question hung between them, weighted not just with professionalism, but with something far more fragile. In the darkness, consent became sacred, a quiet contract spoken aloud. June's breath caught, her thoughts racing, yet beneath the uncertainty was a steady pulse of trust. she could not fully explain. Yes, fabric shifted softly as Roman moved closer, the sound amplified by the silence between thunderclaps. His fingers met her bare shoulder, and the contact was deliberate and reverent. Her skin responded instantly, nerves flaring awake at the contrast between his cool fingertips and her own warmth. Moments later, his hand left her body and pressed into wet clay, producing a muted, viscous sound that echoed strangely in the dark.
Smooth?
His hand returned to her skin, tracing the curve of her shoulder with practiced care, as if memorizing every subtle rise and hollow.
Rough.
He turned back to the clay, fingers sinking in, shaping, resisting, yielding.
Warm.
Again, skin alive and responsive, trembling faintly beneath his touch.
Cold.
Clay, once more, unbreathing and eternal in its stillness.
I am stealing your warmth, June, and putting it into the earth.
The words were intimate, almost confessional. June felt the truth of them in the way the air shifted, in the way her body seemed to lean unconsciously toward him. The storm outside roared on, but inside, the world narrowed to touch, temperature, and breath. Does that make the statue alive?
It makes it immortal.
His hand lingered at her collarbone longer than strictly necessary, fingers resting where her pulse fluttered beneath the skin. He noticed the tremor running through her, subtle but unmistakable, and his touch softened, hovering rather than pressing.
You are shivering.
It's cold in here. Roman stepped back, the absence of his warmth immediate. He pulled off his heavy work shirt, the fabric thick with the scent of labor and stone. When he offered it to her, it carried the weight of him. Hours, days, a life spent shaping the inanimate into something meaningful.
Here, put this on. It smells like dust and sweat. I apologize.
June slipped into the shirt, the cloth enveloping her, oversized and comforting. The warmth lingered as if the fabric still remembered his body. It smells like you, cedar and stone. I like it. Silence followed, heavy and deliberate. Roman did not answer at once. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a warning wrapped in honesty.
You shouldn't like it. You should run away from here. I am a tomb, June. I spend my days with dead things, stones, statues. You are too alive for this place.
The storm seemed to pause, as if listening. June stood wrapped in his shirt, surrounded by darkness and rain and the quiet confession of a man who feared what her aliveness meant. Maybe I want to be haunted. Daylight pressed against the high windows of the studio, pale and dusty, revealing a world frozen in suspended creation. The air smelled of wet clay, metal filings, and old stone. Every surface bore the fingerprints of obsession, with half-formed figures, cracked tools, and sketches layered upon sketches. The quiet was profound, almost sacred, as if the room itself was holding its breath, guarding the fragile act of becoming that lived within these walls. The sudden buzz of the door cut through the stillness like an insult. It was sharp, electronic, and impatient, echoing through the studio's vast interior. That sound did not ask permission. It demanded entry. Even before the door opened, arrogance announced itself, riding in on confidence sharpened by years of unchecked judgment.
Roman, you old hermit, I heard you were working again. I came to see if the rumors are true.
Marcus stepped inside as if the space belonged to him, his gaze sweeping the room with casual ownership. His eyes landed on the clay bust resting beneath a cloth, and with a flick of his wrist, he revealed it. The sculpture stood vulnerable under his stare, unfinished yet alive, its surface still bearing the warmth of Roman's hands. Marcus tilted his head, lips curling with practiced disdain.
Amateurish, sentimental. And who is this, the model?
He circled the sculpture like a predator, bored with its prey, then shifted his attention to June. His footsteps were unhurried and invasive, closing the distance without invitation. June stood still, the weight of his scrutiny pressing against her skin. Marcus's eyes stripped away nuance, searching only for flaws that would validate his own superiority.
A bit plain, is she not? Not your usual dramatic style. Cheap.
The word hung in the air like a stain. Time seemed to slow as Roman's hand tightened around the sculpting hammer. His restraint shattered in an instant. The hammer crashed down onto the metal table with explosive force, the clang reverberating through the studio and rattling tools, sculptures, and nerves alike. The sound was not just noise, it was a warning forged from fury.
Get out.
Roman's voice was low and stripped of warmth, vibrating with a rage that had been carefully contained for too long. His body was rigid, every muscle coiled tight, eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity that left no room for misunderstanding. This was not an artist defending pride. It was a guardian protecting something sacred.
Roman, I am just critiquing.
Roman did not move closer, yet the space between them shrank under the weight of his presence. His grip on the hammer was steady and deliberate. The studio seemed to lean toward him, as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting to see whether creation or destruction would be chosen.
You are insulting my muse. You look at her and see plain. I look at her and see the golden ratio. I see a universe. You are blind, Marcus, and if you do not leave my studio in 10 seconds, I will use this hammer to sculpt your face into something more interesting.
The threat was not shouted. It was measured, precise, and terrifying in its calm. Marcus's confidence fractured. The studio that once seemed quaint now felt feral and alive with danger. In Roman's eyes burned a devotion that Marcus could not comprehend, a devotion that made logic irrelevant.
You are crazy. You have gone feral living in here.
Marcus retreated, his steps hurried and uneven. The door slammed behind him with a final, echoing violence that rippled through the studio. Then silence followed, thick and ringing, broken only by Roman's heavy breathing and the faint, living presence of the unfinished sculptures surrounding them. So man. June's voice was soft and tentative, threading through the quiet. Roman stood with his back half-turned, chest rising and falling as he fought to steady himself. Slowly, he lowered the hammer and placed it back among the tools with care, as if afraid of what his hands might do if given another excuse.
Did he upset you?
Roman finally looked at her. The fury drained from his face, replaced by concern so raw it bordered on vulnerability. His eyes searched hers, desperate for any sign of harm he might have failed to prevent. No. You defended me. You called me your muse. The words landed gently, yet they struck deep. Roman exhaled, shoulders sagging as something inside him unlocked. The studio no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like shelter.
Because you are. Before you walked in, this place was a graveyard. Now the clay speaks to me, because it wants to be you.
The light shifted, catching the curves of the clay bust and illuminating it with quiet reverence. In that moment, the studio was no longer filled with objects, but with purpose. Creation hummed softly in the air, alive and listening, forever changed by her presence. The industrial shower roared to life like a controlled storm trapped inside the studio. Water crashed down from exposed metal pipes, striking the concrete floor with a relentless, echoing force. Steam rose immediately, thick and heavy, blurring the harsh outlines of stone blocks and half-finished sculptures nearby. The air smelled of wet clay and cold iron. This was not a place meant for tenderness. It was a workspace, brutal and functional. Yet, within this harsh cascade, something intimate was unfolding, softened by heat, rhythm, and the isolation of sound swallowing everything else. Roman stood beneath the torrent, shoulders bowed slightly as he worked the stubborn clay from his arms. The residue clung to him as if reluctant to let go, smeared into the lines of muscle and tendon earned through years of carving, lifting, shaping. Each movement was deliberate, economical, as though even washing was an act of labor. When June entered, her footsteps were nearly erased by the thunder of water, but her presence altered the space instantly, like a shift in pressure before a storm breaks. "Let me help. Your back has clay on it. You cannot reach it." She stood just behind him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that the spray dampened her clothes and darkened her hair. Her voice cut gently through the noise, hesitant yet insistent. Roman's back was broad, marked faintly with old scars and new strain. The clay streaked across it like unfinished work. It was an invitation disguised as concern, a boundary tested under the guise of practicality.
I can manage.
His reply came quickly, almost automatically, as if refusing help was a reflex honed over years of solitude. He did not turn. He did not look at her. The water continued to beat against him, drumming over his shoulders and down his spine, but something in his posture tightened. A subtle resistance that had nothing to do with the clay and everything to do with her being there. "Shh, stand still." June reached for the sponge, her fingers brushing briefly against his wrist before she took it. The contact was fleeting but electric. She stepped closer, so close that there was no longer space for pretense. The sponge met his skin, and she began to scrub, slow and careful, tracing the contours of his back. The motion was gentle, almost reverent, as though she were learning him by touch, memorizing the solid reality beneath the water. "You are so strong. Your muscles are like stone." Her words lingered in the steam, mingling with the hiss of water. As she spoke, her hands continued their work, following the lines she described. Strength was not abstract here. It was tangible beneath her palms, warm and alive. Roman inhaled sharply, the compliment landing heavier than intended, because stone was what he knew, what he trusted, and what he feared becoming entirely.
I work with stone. I become stone.
The sentence was less a boast than a confession. He said it as though it were inevitable, a transformation shaped by repetition and isolation. Stone did not feel. Stone endured. As the water streamed down his body, washing away clay, it could not wash away the truth beneath his words. June leaned forward then, her forehead resting against his wet back, closing the distance completely. "You are not stone. You are warm, and your heart is beating fast." Her head against him was a quiet claim. Through skin and muscle, she felt the rapid rhythm beneath, undeniable and human. Roman froze, not into stone, but into stillness. The warmth she spoke of was not just physical, it was the dangerous heat of being seen, of being known. Slowly, he turned, the movement sending water splashing outward as if protesting the shift.
June, do you know what you are doing? I am a man who takes things and freezes them. If I take you, I will never let you go. I will keep you in this studio forever.
Now they faced each other, water cascading between and around them, blurring the edges of their bodies. His expression was carved with restraint, warning layered over desire. He spoke not as a threat, but as a truth he believed immutable. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, betraying the effort it took to remain still, to not reach for her and prove himself right. "I do not want to go anywhere else." Her answer was immediate, unguarded. In the echoing space of the studio, it sounded impossibly certain. Roman lifted his hands then, cupping her wet face with a tenderness that contradicted every word he had just spoken. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, as if memorizing her, as if already afraid of losing her.
You are dangerous, more dangerous than a chisel slipping. Go, before I ruin you.
He pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief, restrained, and devastating. It was not a beginning, but a forced ending, an act of self-denial masquerading as protection. When he pulled away, the water rushed in to fill the space between them again, colder somehow. The studio remained, the stone remained, but something had shifted irreversibly, washed clean and left raw beneath the relentless shower. Late night settled over the studio like a held breath. The world beyond the windows had gone quiet, leaving only the intimate sanctuary of stone, dust, and shadow. In the center of the room, the pottery wheel began its low, rhythmic hum, a steady pulse that seemed to sync with the heartbeat of the space itself. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cold water, and each rotation of the wheel promised transformation, raw matter waiting for intention to give it form. As the wheel spun, wet clay responded with soft, squelching sounds, a tactile language of pressure and release. The sound was organic and almost alive, as if the clay itself were breathing. Moisture slicked the surface, catching the light in brief flashes, while the centrifugal motion pulled everything outward, daring human hands to impose order on its chaos.
I need a break from the marble. Let's throw some clay. Sit at the wheel.
June hesitated only a moment before moving closer, the stool cool beneath her as she positioned herself at the wheel. The spinning disc dominated her field of vision, hypnotic and unforgiving, ready to reveal every mistake. The studio felt suddenly smaller and more intimate, as if the darkness beyond the lamps had pressed inward to watch. I'm terrible at this. It always wobbles. Roman's answer came not just in words, but in movement. He stepped closer, his presence altering the air around her, confident and unhurried, as if the solution were already known and all that remained was to demonstrate it.
Because you are not centered.
He sat down behind her, close enough that his body framed hers completely. His legs settled on either side of her hips, anchoring her to the stool and to him. The contact was deliberate and instructive, a physical lesson before the clay was even touched.
I will center you. Put your hands on the clay. Wet them.
She dipped her fingers into the basin and let cool water run over her skin. Droplets fell back onto the clay, darkening it and preparing it. The wheel spun faster, its hum deepening as if urging them forward. Water splashed softly as her hands met the clay, the surface slick and yielding. The increased speed blurred the edges of the spinning form, turning it into a smooth, circular illusion as everything extraneous seemed to fade.
Feel the centrifugal force. Fight it. Push in.
His hands came down over hers, larger and warmer, enclosing her fingers with practiced ease. He leaned forward, guiding not just her hands, but her posture and breath, teaching her how resistance could become control.
Harder. Force the clay into the center.
The clay responded as wobble gave way to balance. Her breath caught, not only from exertion, but from the awareness of how closely their movements aligned. It's slippery. The words escaped her softly, half complaint and half admission. The texture beneath her fingers felt alive, and her focus wavered between the spinning clay and the sensation of Roman guiding her.
It's sensual. Earth and water. That's all we are.
As he spoke, he guided her hands upward, encouraging the clay to rise. A cylinder formed between their palms, its walls thinning under careful pressure.
Now we'll pull gently. Let the walls rise.
Their hands traveled together along the length of the clay, shaping height from formlessness. The pot grew taller and smoother as the wheel's steady spin underscored the moment.
Beautiful.
Roman, your arms are around me. The realization settled over her, awareness of proximity and breath threading through the space between them.
I know. I am the mold. You are the clay. Or maybe I am the clay and you are molding me. I think I am melting, June.
His voice lowered, thoughtful and unguarded, as if creation had softened something rigid within him, then melt. The wheel kept spinning as Roman released the pot, and without his stabilizing force, the clay collapsed inward. He caught her hands instead, fingers threading through hers, both slick with mud and water. Their intertwined fingers were coated in earth, a tangible record of what they had shaped together.
I can't resist anymore. I want to sculpt you. With my hands, with my mouth, every inch.
He leaned in and brushed his lips against her neck, leaving damp, earthy traces. The unhurried kiss blended with the fading hum of the wheel, sealing the moment in breath, clay, and shadow. The gallery awakened like a living organism, breathing softly through the murmurs of its guests. Crystal glasses chimed as champagne was poured, the sound light and celebratory, echoing off pristine white walls. Shoes whispered across polished stone floors. Polite applause rose and fell in careful waves, restrained yet eager, as critics, collectors, and strangers leaned forward with the shared anticipation of witnessing something rare. The air carried a faint scent of citrus, marble dust, and expensive perfume, binding art and audience together in a single expectant moment. When the curtain was finally drawn back, it moved slowly and deliberately, as if honoring what it concealed. Fabric slid along its rail with a hushed rasp, revealing first a suggestion of form, then a curve, then an undeniable presence. Light poured in from above, catching on pale stone and transforming it into something almost warm. The unveiling was ceremonial, inviting the crowd to surrender to silence before reaction overtook restraint. The crowd gasped as one. What stood before them was not a partial figure, not a study or fragment, but a full statue carved from marble with reverence and intimacy. A woman emerged from the stone as though she had always been there, waiting to be freed. Her posture was upward, her chin lifted, eyes fixed on something beyond the room, beyond the moment. Hope was carved into her spine. Strength defined her limbs. Beauty was not ornamental here, it was earned. Recognition rippled quietly through the space. This was not an abstract muse or an imagined goddess. This was June. Her likeness was unmistakable, yet transformed and refined through the artist's gaze into something enduring. The marble held her softness without fragility and her grace without submission. Every contour suggested resilience, as if the stone itself had learned courage by holding her shape. It's me, but I look so strong." Her voice barely carried past her lips, shaped by disbelief. June stood frozen, eyes tracing the familiar lines of a face she knew intimately yet had never seen like this. The strength unsettled her and moved her. She saw not how the world had shaped her, but how she had survived it. In the stillness of the gallery, her breath felt too loud and her heartbeat too exposed.
That is how I see you, not fragile, unbreakable.
Roman's words were calm and steady, spoken not for the audience, but for her alone. He stepped closer, closing the distance that suddenly felt vast. His gaze never left June, not the statue, as if the marble were only an echo and she was the truth. His hand reached for hers with quiet certainty, fingers wrapping around her palm and grounding her in the present.
Everyone is asking the price. They want to buy the muse?
Around them, whispers grew sharper and more calculated. Appraisals were made in low tones, numbers exchanged behind practiced smiles. The statue had already become an object of desire, something to be owned, displayed, and claimed. Yet within Roman's grip, June felt insulated from the transactional hunger of the room, as though the world could bargain all it wanted and still never touch what truly mattered. "Will you sell it?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, shaped by fear and curiosity intertwined. June searched Roman's face, wondering where art ended and possession began, and where admiration crossed into loss. The statue loomed beside them, silent but listening, a mirror of the choice suspended between them.
Never. It belongs to the artist, just like the model.
His answer was immediate and unwavering. There was no calculation in it and no hesitation. The declaration cut through the noise of the gallery, reframing everything. The statue was not merchandise, it was a testament. And June was not an object of inspiration to be traded. She was a presence and a partner in creation. Is that a proposal, Mr. Castillo? A smile curved across her lips, soft but daring. It carried nerves and hope in equal measure. June tilted her head slightly, testing the weight of his words and the promise implied within them. The gallery faded again, leaving only the space between them charged with possibility.
It is a declaration of ownership. Come home, June. We have more clay.
His voice lowered on the final words, intimate and resolute. Home was no longer just a place. It was an invitation to continue becoming. The marble statue stood behind them, complete and eternal, while ahead waited unfinished forms, warm clay, and the living hands that would shape it. Together, they turned away from the crowd, leaving applause and appraisal behind and stepping toward what was still waiting to be made. The studio had returned to a state of near silence, the kind that felt earned rather than empty. Sunlight filtered through tall, dust-streaked windows, settling gently over shelves of half-finished sculptures and tools worn smooth by years of use. Outside, birds called to one another in soft, unhurried patterns, their songs slipping in through a cracked window. The air carried the faint scent of clay and damp earth, grounding the space in something humble and real, far removed from the torment that once lived here. On the floor, a simple mattress lay between scattered sketches and discarded cloths. Roman and June rested there together, bodies aligned without tension, as if they had finally learned the shape of peace. The hardness of the studio floor no longer mattered. Warmth traveled easily between them. Their breathing fell into a shared rhythm, slow and trusting, while the weight of the past seemed to loosen its grip, allowing the present moment to stretch and settle around them. Did you ever find your inspiration again? Or was it just that one statue? June's voice broke the quiet gently, not with doubt, but with curiosity shaped by everything they had endured. Her question lingered in the air between them, mingling with the dust motes and bird song. It carried echoes of long nights, of silence filled with uncertainty, of watching Roman wrestle with his need to capture perfection. She did not turn to look at him. Instead, she let the question exist, trusting him to meet it honestly. Roman lifted her hand slowly, pressing his lips to her skin with deliberate tenderness. The gesture was unhurried, almost reverent, as though he were acknowledging not just her presence, but the life pulsing beneath her warmth. In that simple motion lived all the words he once failed to say, all the moments when art had come before feeling. His touch was steady now, free of desperation.
I found something better than inspiration. I found peace. I do not need to freeze moments in stone anymore, because I have you here, alive, warm, moving.
As he spoke, Roman drew her closer, his arm wrapping around her with quiet certainty. The pull was protective, intimate, as if he were anchoring himself to the present through her body. For years, his hands had sought permanence in marble and clay, fighting time itself. Now, they rested on June's back, rising and falling with her breath, accepting movement and change as something beautiful rather than terrifying.
I love you, my muse.
The words carried none of the old obsession, none of the hunger to possess or preserve. They were soft, settled, spoken by someone who had finally learned to let go. In that declaration was gratitude, humility, and a quiet awe for a love that existed not as an object, but as a living presence. The studio, once a place of fixation, now bore witness to something gentler and infinitely stronger. I love you, my sculptor. Her reply was immediate and sure, infused with warmth that needed no embellishment. It acknowledged who he had been without trapping him there, honoring the artist while embracing the man. Around them, the studio seemed to exhale, as if the walls themselves were relieved. The past no longer demanded to be carved into permanence. It could simply exist, softened by forgiveness and shared stillness. As the moment settled, a faint mechanical hum began to rise, the pottery wheel turning slowly, somewhere behind them. Its steady rotation filled the background, not urgent, not demanding, but patient. The sound blended with the birdsong and the hush of breathing, creating a gentle rhythm that carried them forward. The wheel did not shape anything new tonight. It merely spun, marking time as the light gradually faded and the studio slipped into rest.